Hi, I'm back again, Kevin Ledoux, the Pragmatic Luther. I have some content today that I thought would be worth doing a video on. I'm going to laminate a set of rims today. And before I get right down to the nitty gritty, I want to talk about laminated rims just a little bit because some of you who maybe are just starting out or haven't done too many guitars or have not done this, you may have kind of a skeptical view of this. But there are some advantages. First of all, because of imported guitars, I think, just the L word itself, laminated, seems to take on kind of a dirty connotation. And it doesn't have to. There are some advantages to laminated rims, and those are two in particular. For one thing, stability. And once they've attained their shape, they stay that way. There's no problem there. The stability feature is obviously good because you're not going to have to worry so much about rim checks and that kind of thing going on after the instrument is built. But another advantage that we may not think about very often is by laminating a rim, you stiffen it in such a way that it does not soak up kinetic energy and wick it away from the top as well as a solid rim can. Now, you could debate, well, historically rims have played an active role even though we didn't really want it to, but since it was part of the tonal palette, so to speak, maybe we want to question laminating a rim, and that's fair enough. But what I have to offer you is just an alternative, and I think a laminated rim in some regards is easier. The pucker factor goes up an awful lot when you're bending a solid rim with heat and moisture, and sometimes it doesn't work out as well. But with a laminated rim, you can eliminate an awful lot of that, and you can be pretty sure you're going to come up with a good rim. Another downside, if you will, consider that if you cut a piece of wood, if you resaw or slice a piece of wood, when that piece of wood gets to be just down to 1/16 of an inch, just in order to cut it that thin, you are already wasting an equal amount of wood, because if you band resaw, your bandsaw is going to take away, it's going to cut a kerf of about 1/16 of an inch. So what you have at 1/16, you also have on the floor in dust. And then if you drum sand that or hand plane it or scrape it down further, therefore resawing that piece rather, a little bit thicker than 1/16 of an inch in order to get down where you want to be, you're really wasting a lot of material. So you could A/B back and forth whether or not it's worthwhile doing. But I look at it this way. If you have a material that's quite valuable to you and you don't have a lot of it, you can make an outer layer rim that's really very nice, and you may be able to extend the use of a particular billet or a plank or two by using that as an outer layer in your laminated rim. Okay, enough philosophy and all of that stuff. Let's get right down to the nitty gritty with this thing. So to prepare for this, I've taken my outside mold for the particular model I'm building. In this case, just out of interest, I'm building about a 14.5 inch lower bout. You'd call this similar in size to a double O, if that is of interest to anyone. At any rate, I took the mold, and as you can see, I stacked it one side on top of the other, and I drilled and screwed it together so that I can separate it later on and put it back together. And I only use 3 screws. I don't think you need to put it together like you're building a garage or anything. You just need to get it stable. And I have made blocks all the way around this. Now, I have done this before with a little bit less preparation and made out just fine, but I thought I'd like to tweak this. And so I have made blocks that in some cases have a little bit of arching to them. Here's one for the waist. Here's one for next to the waist. And I've done that because it's just going to make life a little bit easier, and it's going to make the gluing process and the thoroughness of the adhesion, so to speak, it's going to ensure that that's complete and thorough throughout the rim. So it's not too difficult to do. Now, making these shapes and so on, I'll do a video segment on that in just a little bit. and show you how that can be done and show you a thing or two that I've learned about these and the outside shape of the mold that I happen to have. So as I said, I made a bunch of these calls, if you will. I'm going to remove a few um, because what I discovered the first time around with this is, you can make a bunch of little, just narrow square blocks like this. And I use spray adhesive and just stick this thin packing foam on them to give them a little bit of flex. And I made some curved ones, and I beveled the backs of them so that as they go together around an inside curve, they don't fight each other. But the trouble you run into is if you have a lot of narrow ones like this, it'll work. But all of a sudden you need 18 gazillion clamps. And even at those prices by that real inexpensive store that's everywhere, it still adds up. So what I did was I made a few wider ones because you can get the clamping pressure you need. That's not a problem. I wouldn't go too wide with these. Um, obviously the wider you go with these, the more pressure you got to have to even it all out. So, 2.5, 3 inches, whatever you can get, something like a 2x4, scrap 2x4, I think is probably about all you want to do. But what I discovered was that besides having to achieve a very similar shape as you have on the inside of the mold, in my particular case, you can see I've got a straight facet here and another facet here that's straight and another one over here that's straight, but they may or may not be parallel to the way that caul is made. And of course, you want to get a grip so that the caul is going to stay where you want it to be without slipping and sliding. So the way I did that is pretty simple. I just take some scrap 2x4 like this, or if you need something thicker, you could glue up 2 or 3 of these, make a 3x3 or whatever. I happen to have this big slab of redwood here, which I kind of hate to use. But anyway, what I did was I simply position this caul that I want to make on the mold, and I use a combination square to make sure that that surface is parallel. And once I get that parallel, I just reach under there with a short pencil, and I'm going to trace that. And of course, what you come up with is that line representing the shape of the inside. And it's easy to do. Now, you can cut this out with a bandsaw by standing this on end. And yep, these will tend to tip and wobble. So make up a scrap square block out of something, or you may have something available already, to just double face tape that so that when you bandsaw that out, this stands nice and square. That'll be helpful. But you just saw that out. If you have a belt sander, you can refine it on that. If not, you can refine it with files, hand planes, whatever you got. And then I use some standard, Elmer's spray adhesive, and I sprayed it, and then adhere this packing foam to it. This stuff, you can find this everywhere, and if you buy things online, you probably got some on hand. Now, it's real easy to do. In addition to that, you can see, and you probably noticed in the previous section of the video, that I've even pointed out some positions for these. You can see the green line here. And I took the time a few minutes ago to number these because I figured, now that you got all of these made up, it might be helpful if you can just make sure you get these all in the right positions since you got this all planned out. If you're going to do it, might as well do it right. So you can see that this takes a little bit of time. It probably took me an hour and a half to make all of these different shapes around here. And I'm still patching in with an occasional, just little square one here. But I think this is going to work out really well. So now the question is, what about the laminates themselves? So the question is, I guess, how thick do each one of the layers in your laminate sandwich want to be? And I think there's a lot of variation that can be had there. In fact, I want to bring to your attention, if you're not already, that there have been some videos on this already. Bohannon has a real good one, and I'm really doing pretty much the same thing that he did, but I'm hoping that I'm addressing some details that he may not have. And he has a very casual style of presenting that I think leaves a little bit out. He's awfully good, um, but I'm hoping I might fill in some of the gaps. And I also want to bring to your attention a classical builder in New York, John Bogdanovich, uses a laminated rim. And to my knowledge, the center of that sandwich, I believe that's not even solid wood. I believe it's MDF, but I'm not positive about that. And he achieves obviously terrific results. He's a world-class builder. Um, but anyway, how many layers do you need? I think you could go with 2 layers. I'm going to go with 3, and I think some builders do use 2, others use 3. I don't think there's any need for more than 3. But here are my concerns in particular. I want my outer layer of my rim, the one that shows the most, I want that to be a little thicker so that if I have to do a little bit of scraping or some sanding, I got a little bit of wiggle room to do that. My center layer can be the thickest layer, I suppose. There's no reason why it can't. But then my inner layer, it could be the same thickness, I guess, as anything else. But my big fear is that as I get down to veneer thickness, that if that gluing is not absolutely perfect every single square inch, that I'm going to get bowing and rippling and things in one of those layers of veneer. And I want to avoid that. So my way of doing that is to simply stiffen those veneers by making them a little bit thicker. So I'm going to use this outer layer, and I got to grab my caliper here. Sorry for leaving the camera, but just to give you an idea, my outer layer, I'm bending at 45 thousandths of an inch thick. My center layer, I'm bending at 38 thousandths of an inch thick. I probably intended to hit 35 and missed, I don't know. And I'm back to 40 thousandths for my inside layer. So there you have that. Now that's going to bend very easily. But before I filmed this segment, I made some strips and I said, okay, how thick can you get before this becomes really difficult to do? So I took a piece of hard maple and just a sample of it, and I drum sanded it to 60 thousandths of an inch, 1.52 millimeters. And as you can see by the face here, it was okay. And okay is all I can say about it. It was tough to get it to go around the corners, and I think if you're going to sandwich this stuff together, it might be a hard pull to keep this under control. Now, I did not do this experiment with all the same samples, so your gas mileage may vary. Here's a piece of black walnut, nicely quartered, by the way. And I bent this at 65 thousandths of an inch. And as you can see, and that's 1.65 millimeters. And as you can see by the face on it, that did not go well. It was hard to pull it into shape. It was hard to get the clamps on it. Once you get the clamps on, they'll draw in. But this was not cooperative at all. And here's a strip of black cherry, not quarter sawn at all. In fact, as you can see by the grain, just perfectly flat sawn. I bent this at 55 thousandths, 1.397 millimeters, and as you can see by the face, that was a happy experience. So even at 55 thousandths, you can still make this work really well. So that gives you an idea of how thick you may want to make your layers and how you want to sandwich this up. So my next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my layers of material and I'm going to prepare the glue. I'm going to put the glue on them and get them ready to go. So to make this actually happen, you can see here on my bench, I've taped down a piece of wax paper because there's going to be a lot of glue going around here. And I'm going to spread that glue either with a paddle or a printer's brayer. If you look right over about there in the background, you can see a printer's brayer, which I'm going to use. You want to just avoid having a mess all over your bench, I guess. Now, over here, where I'm actually going to do the work, I have set up all of these bending calls, and I've put numbers on them so that there's no guesswork to this. And they're all lined up in numerical order, and there's uh, my form all set up and ready to go. And I've clamped it down because there's nothing worse than having work moving around and your bench or your work area trying to move around right along with you. And you'll want to keep your clamps handy. As you can see, I've got quite a feces load, shall we say, of clamps ready to do the work. Now, what about adhesive? Well, over there you can see there's a tube or a bottle, excuse me, of standard aliphatic resin glue, Type Bond. You could use that, but you'll want to move very quickly. Right next to it, just behind that clamp there, is a bottle of Type Bond 3. That's the waterproof stuff. Now, you certainly don't need the waterproof, but that has an extended working time on it, which will buy you a few more minutes of assembly and trying to work this thing together. So I'm going to use that waterproof. You could probably use Type Bond 2. That has a slightly extended uh, open time as well beyond the standard Type Bond. So here we go. We're going to make this thing happen right about now. I've got my glue sandwich made up, and I have a mark here, if I can find it. I've got a mark on my waist, and I'm going to pull that waist in first, and I'm going to start with my waist block. This will probably be the hardest one in the whole bunch, and I may even want to pull in a little bit just with a clamp at the upper bout to help me get started. And maybe a little bit over here too. It's doable. So I'm ready to go here, and for this I'm going to use a heavier duty clamp. And so I'm pulling that waist in first, and I'm constantly checking to make sure that all of my segments here, the layers of my sandwich, are down. All right, so we're going to start right in next to that. And draw that down. So as you can see, I started in that center, and I'm just going to go around to each segment and pull that in. And right now I'm going to use this number 7 to trap number 6 a little bit better where I want it. I think my number 6 call could use a little bit of redesign, some rethinking there, but that may happen in the future. So I'm just going around and around of each one of these. Well, here it is. We're finished. Now, as you could see in the previous segment, there was a little thinking on my feet, so to speak, improvising, maybe even a little frustration here and there. I guess that's to be expected. And it shows that I could have improved my preparation. And I can see now some areas where I will, in fact, do that, because this is a technique that I'm going to use, I think, for the majority of instruments that I build in the future. To me, this is a real practical way to go, and a way to make a better guitar. So here is a completed rim. Now, its edges still need to be trued up, and of course the ends have got to be cut off to the proper length and so on. And that'll be done. I'll put this right back in the mold, even up the rims, and cut them to length using that as a gauge to do all that stuff with. So this particular one, I've got a walnut interior and a maple exterior. Uh, the client is going to love that. And I think it's kind of neat that it's one thing on one side and something else on the other. You could do this any way you want. And another thought that I had was, if you have thin materials that you can't do rims out of, or, maybe you have two pieces of, say, walnut or cherry or mahogany or whatever they are. Maybe you broke a rim or two trying to heat it up. Um, and you've got extra stuff. Well, a mismatched interior, as long as it's not grossly mismatched, I suppose, could suffice. And you may be able to use materials that you otherwise might have to, I don't know, burn, throw away, who knows. Um, at any rate, might be a way to maximize your material. So there you have it. Good luck if you try this. I'm sure you can make it work for yourself. It's not too hard. Uh, Once again, I'm Kevin Ledoux, the Pragmatic Luther. I want to encourage you to put a like on the video, and if you have not, I'd like to ask once again that you subscribe to my channel. I will be back again when I have more content that I think might be helpful and valuable. As it is now, thank you for watching, and I'm happy to be back in the shop and doing just what I'm doing right now. Thanks again.